Elie Jacobs is the founding partner of Purposeful Advisors. They're an organization delivering premium communications and advisory, crisis communications, and public affairs services to organizations and their leadership teams. Welcome to the show, Elie.
Great to be here.
Excited to have you on. Tell us about your personal lives, more about your work, and why you do what you do.
Why I do what I do was sort of by accident, as best I could put it. I graduated college, really had no idea what I wanted to do. Played golf over that summer, and then get into September 2001. 9/11 happens. I decided for, really no apparent reason to grab a bag of clothes, bag of GMAT books, LSAT books, GRE books, try to figure out what I was going to do with my life, and went off abroad for a few weeks and came back. And when my parents decided I had screwed around long enough, I came back and I happened to be reading an old issue of the New Yorker. And in the Talk of the Town section, which is kind of these, the couple columns long, a little bit tongue in cheek, kind of writing about current events in New York. There was an article about how President Clinton's office, that was just about to open in Harlem, had put out an ad looking for interns. Think of the timing, he left office a year beforehand. Lewinsky, interns, ha ha ha. But in the meantime, they reprinted the whole ad in the New Yorker, and I just sent a resume in, not having done anything political in college, really not being particularly thinking that that was a direction I wanted to go in. So just sheer dumb luck of having read the New Yorker a few weeks behind, and that sent me down the path that I'm on. I worked in the office for about 9 months. It was unpaid, so it wouldn't have been a long time thing. But at the time, it was very small. The Clean Global Initiative was nowhere near existence yet. So I got a lot of exposure to both to him and the senior staff, and really learned kind of the ins and outs of political communications and kind of how you operate at that very, very high level, and realized I kind of enjoyed that. I enjoyed the pressure. I enjoyed kind of the impact you can have. And that's just as a former president. So I worked on a couple of campaigns that fall, doing pretty minimal work. Everybody lost. And then I was still in the New York area and just started hunting for jobs, using kind of the Clinton network to do as many informational interviews as I possibly could, to learn as much as I could kind of about the different directions I could go in. Ended up working at a small little PR shop for a few months as an intern, then switched to a slightly larger small PR shop, and moved on to a much bigger firm called Brunswick, and then another firm called Public Strategies, and kind of bounced around over the last 20 plus years. So really just dumb luck that I ended up in an area that I either have some natural talent in being able to take complicated issues and break them down, or being kind of, the Yiddish word nudnik, kind of the annoying little imp of asking lots and lots of questions of people and pushing kind of pushing expectations, pushing kind of what is accepted as fact, not as fact, but as sort of the operating theses of companies, or organizations, nonprofits. So I do what I do because I enjoy it, and I guess I'm a little good at it. And I didn't think I would ever make it through med school, so that just was never going to be an option.
Appreciate that. So you threw all these books in a bag. Did you end up reading any of those study books?
No, I didn't. I ended up taking the LSATs. Mostly just a friend needed a ride, and I said, "Well, if I'm going to drive you, I may as well try to take them too." Did okay, not having done any practice exams beforehand, but um, thankfully, I did not go the law school route.
You know, I
Despite the fact that I spend lots and lots of times with lawyers and doing law type stuff now, I'm very happy that I'm not working at a
particularly,
law
right,
firm.
right. Yeah, I think I'd be an unhappy attorney as well. Well, it sounds like you probably learned from the best. I don't know if there's I sort of perceive Bill Clinton to be the most fluid, effective political operator that maybe we've had, or at least in a long time.
Certainly he is the master communicator. And you kind of just pick up on that when he's having a bad day and kind of grunting at you, or when he's putting on a show for, VIPs who are in the office, or a room full of 300 people, or, a group of third graders who come up to the office. Kind of knows how to talk to people at their level, and demonstrate that he's interested, because he actually is kind of just interested in everything and everybody. So great experience, and it's a tough bar for other politicians to climb, regardless of party, to kind of reach that level of general, like, real compassion and intelligence, and kind of being able to lever the two things together. And so it was a great experience, and I've been very lucky to have some other terrific mentors over the course of my career.
So what do you view like what do you do?
What do I do?
Like are you
The
are you
easiest way to think about it is we run campaigns for corporations, which is a tagline of a former firm I worked for. But I've picked it up because they no longer exist and we do. So if you think about the way a political campaign is portrayed in TV, movies, books, or even just the newspaper, what you're doing is you're trying to influence people's opinion. You're trying to get them to do something. You're trying to get them to vote, try to get them to donate, try to get them to back the policies that you want them to back. So we do all that for corporations or nonprofits, whether it's creating a profile out of a brand and kind of standing up an organization that's brand new, going in and doing crisis response and crisis and reputation rehabilitation on the back end of that, reputation management while you're dealing with things. We basically do all that sort of external outreach. We don't do advertising, but we know how to work with advertising firms and we bring them in. We don't do polling, but we work with pollsters and know how to interpret that data. We do the messaging, the narrative development, the reputation management, the issues management, crisis, hopefully preparedness as opposed to response, although the response part usually pays better. Um, so what we do is we help companies say the right thing to the right group of people at the right time to maximize the impact.
all right. Say the right thing to the right people at the right time to maximize the impact. Preparedness over response. Response pays better. It certainly makes sense. And an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, but I don't imagine too many people take that medicine.
Yeah, I mean, look, we say it all the time. Like, you can call us when you can call the thoracic surgeon when you are in that level of damage, or you can take a Tylenol every day and take a walk.
Like, nope, I'm not doing that.
Not doing that. That sounds like way too much work.
How has I was thinking about our conversation this morning, and what came to my mind was the Bud Light. Just I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah,
Certainly controversy and
yeah,
boycott, and then everything going on with Disney. But then I also
yeah,
thought, well, then you've got Donald Trump, who has turned this whole thing on its head, the way he communicates, and
yeah.
it's not for better or for worse. Probably, who knows? But it's just so different.
Different, yeah. It's an interesting, it's a fascinating time right now to I try to take a step back and kind of look at where the trends are, where they're going, how things are being interpreted, how things are being moved. What Bud Light did when they created a personalized can for the person that they did it for, they were responding to what they thought at the time trend lines were pointing towards. And in reality, that's probably the direction trend lines are going, and more acceptance of LGBTQ plus, community, more interaction between generations, interaction between ethnicities, et cetera. That's kind of the direction we're going in, despite what it might look like right now. Um, but the other side that doesn't particularly want that pushed back really, really hard, and it in a much more effective way. When you kind of have a general tide going in one direction, it's going to keep going and it's going to impact things. It's going to erode the soil around it. It's going to cut like the Grand Canyon, right? It's going to cut the hole through the Colorado is going to cut through the valley. It's not that hard to just put a dam up and stop the whole thing, right? So that's sort of what the MAGA right has done to some extent, is they've just effectively put up a dam against the direction that things were going in. Whether that dam then becomes the trend or it dies out or it switches, that's sort of the big question that nobody really knows right now.
And is that not knowable because just we can't get our arms around the internet and what what popular opinion really is versus what we
Yeah.
perceive it to be?
That's part of it, I think. Part of it also is, we've been talking about people get their news in different ways. We've been saying that for 20 years now, since, the real rise of high-speed internet and social media. And that's all very true. And I would say that the trend lines are still being represented by kind of mainstream media. Um, the difference is that DAM, to go back to that idea, is very effectively utilizing all the new ways people get their news, right? So it's the person who doesn't watch the news, but they listen to Joe Rogan for 3 hours a day. or Theo Vaughn or whoever, any of these other folks that are kind of in that um, ecosystem. So it's the question is, does that kind of die out? Is it individual driven, meaning Donald Trump and his ilk and that group of podcasters, or does it spread and there are more people that kind of stand up? It's very hard to say that Trumpism will live past Donald Trump, because he's such an iconoclast and such a unique figure in terms of how he speaks, how he motivates people, kind of the almost absent-minded nature of his leadership. But I said to somebody the other day, kind of, counterintuitive, I was like, maybe he's right. Like you don't know. There are certain things he has been right about, a lot of things that he's clearly been very, very wrong about. So I think that's their big question is there's really no way to know what's going to happen not in the next 4 years, because I think the next 4 years are going to look a lot like the last 102 days, 105 days. It's a real question, I think, what happens past that. And Donald Trump, as a politician, is not going to let anybody take any of his spotlight away until he absolutely has to cede ground. So it's really difficult to determine or suggest that somebody's going to step up and kind of carry the mantle forward. And at the same time, it's very difficult, if politics is more downstream of culture than culture being downstream of politics, but we're in kind of a mixed up time now. So while there's no real opposition leader, it's also hard to say that the other side, that the MAGA right doesn't just continue because nobody stopped it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's all really well said. It should be really interesting. It made me think about just Donald Trump and him winning his next term here. The whole idea of never outshine the master. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's from The Art of War, but it's like rule number one. And so you're not going to see anybody on the Republican side try to outshine him because he will attempt to smash them and probably will.
Yep.
So it should be really interesting. In terms of like the communications around COVID and the vaccine and wildfires and just there's so many things that have been happening. Do you think that people are wanting what they perceive to be authenticity, which they get from Trump, or are we going to have the pendulum going back to the archetypal, everything's going to be okay. You don't need to worry about this kind of you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I was saying, kind of, the way things have shifted where, again, if politics runs downstream of culture, the culture is in this kind of zeitgeist of, everything is disintermediated, meaning that there's no filters anymore, right? If the local news used to be your filter, that's not really a thing anymore. Again, the podcasts and kind of the ecosystem that exists on social media, people can go where they want to go to find what they decide is the news that they want, which is a really bizarre thing to say. But that's very much kind of what is happening, right? People can go listen to Joe Rogan and they can hear him talk about, I tried to listen to an episode a few months ago. He had Mark Andreessen on, the big venture cap guy. There have been a couple quotes that have kind of floated up into the media from that. So I decided, all right, let me try to listen to this. So for starters, I don't have 3 hours ever to like just sit and listen to something.
Sure.
Nor do I have the attention span. Like maybe if I was in the car on a long drive by myself, but I still don't know that that would work. I kind of need to have Metallica or Rage or something playing so that I stay awake. But they started right off the bat about kind of conspiracy theories about the assassination attempt against Trump. And I'm listening to this and I was like, wow, they just dove right into that. Like no pretext, no introduction of it, just sort of like, hey, Mark, I hear you like a good conspiracy theory, and off to the races. So, again, it's very much that people can choose where they're getting their news from, and therefore they can choose what news they're getting and what it means. The problem is when you no longer have authenticity, terrific. Go be an authentic person as long as you're not causing harm. And I think where we run into problems is if there aren't authorities, not authorities in the terms of like law enforcement, authorities in terms of, stature authorities that kind of have that, everybody talks about Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man in America, right? Like that was an authoritative thing. Without that, you run into problems about, kind of specious arguments and counterfacts about, or non-unfacts, lies, falsehoods about COVID, about forest fires, about water, about China, about immigration, about drugs,
All of it.
right? So it's really, and now we're seeing how difficult it is to kind of put the genie back in the bottle of sort of, no, no, we know what we're talking about. We've got, a room full of scientists over here who have all studied this thing, and a room full of scientists over there who have all looked at it from the other way, and they've all determined that this is what is going on. But then if you just have somebody who's very authentic and very charismatic say, nah. So it's hard, and it's hard from a communications perspective. I think people just, everyday, mom and pop stores, or the average, local accountant or money manager. I think they're all struggling with sort of how do you demonstrate expertise in something if there's no facts anymore? If everything is opinion, and opinion is just as valuable as fact, right? Everybody, Bill Clinton used to say this all the time. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. They're not entitled to their own facts. I actually don't think it was Clinton. I think it was him quoting Daniel Patrick Moynihan, but that was the quote. You're entitled to your own opinion, not your own facts. Well, when that gets reversed, that's really where things become problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I remember having a conversation years ago. And it was about Basecamp. Do you remember the Basecamp? They had their internal communications, and they said you
Yeah,
can't talk about politics anymore. You do that on your time. And a lot of employees left, and there was a big kind of hullabaloo about, leave your politics at the door kind of a thing. But and that was going back and forth. And it feels like we've gone through sort of the whole washing machine on that kind of a conversation. So difficult for us to like, and I appreciate everything that you've laid out so far makes sense to me. But when a CEO is asking you this for our company, like how do we move forward? How
yeah,
should we be communicating? What should we not talk
yeah.
about?
You have to go back to one of the reasons we're called purposeful advisors is not about ESG or DEI or planting trees. Those are all great things. Those are good purposes. That's not what we do. That there are plenty of firms that can advise you on that, and we'll suggest them. When we talk about purpose, it's going back to the basics. Why do you do what you do? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you difference are you trying to make in the world, right? And Simon Sinek has this great idea of the golden circle. It's why, how, and what. Most people know what you do. Some people know how you do it. Very few people know why you do it. So we want companies to really understand from startup level straight up to, Fortune 100 companies. Startup level, they need to kind of understand what that purpose is. It's not to make money, right? That's a side benefit. It's never to make money. Some companies, it's to make money, like, but most companies, there's a larger purpose. Either you've invented something really cool that you think is going to help the world, or even if it's, a fintech company, like you're trying to accomplish something, not, making money is the very good side benefit when you can do it. So when we're talking to corporations or their PR advisors or nonprofits, when it comes an idea of talking about a societal issue, does it connect to your purpose? And if it doesn't, you probably should just keep your mouth shut. I think my industry has done a really bad job over the last 10 to 15 years suggesting that corporations need to have opinions about things that they really don't need to have opinions about. A good example is Nike, right? When Colin Kaepernick took a knee and then wasn't signed by any team and he kind of became the face of a Nike campaign, that made sense. Nike's whole thing is everybody is an athlete. And if everybody is an athlete and they play a very big role in diverse communities, that's something that they need to speak out about, right? Like the Charles Barkley ad, I'm not a role model. Like that they need to talk about something like that. Does Coca-Cola necessarily need to have an opinion about Black Lives Matter or about an immigration ban? Possibly, if it directly impacts their employees or their customers. Now, everything will impact customers at some level. The question that companies need to ask is this something that I need to talk about that is going to help me retain customers or get more customers? Or am I going to lose customers by saying something? Or am I going to disappoint my employees by saying something or not by saying something? And then the flip side of that is if you don't set the standard that you're out there talking about everything, then you don't have to talk about everything. But as soon as you start talking about things, it becomes a question, why'd you talk about that and not that? Or isn't this thing as important as that thing? And that's where you really run into problems because then you start talking about everything. And Quite frankly, Jamie Dimon's a very bright, he's CEO of JP Morgan Chase, smart, accomplished guy, seems to, really understand kind of big issues in a intelligent way and talks about them. I don't really care about Jamie Dimon's opinion about most things other than the economy or the banking world. Now it's all interrelated. That's unquestionable. But I don't necessarily need to hear him opine about things. The same thing with, the average CEO, the average, business head. You really have to think about what differences is going to make to my direct stakeholders, my employees, their families, the communities that they live in, my customers, my shareholders. And if you look at that kind of across the entire stakeholder map that you have, and then you start weighing things, right? Is this group going to be offended if I say something or don't say something? How offended are they going to be? What's the reaction going to be, right? Nike definitely thought through that there's a possibility there's going to be a backlash to us coming out with this Colin Kaepernick ad. And there was, right? There was that big social media thing where a bunch of people were burning their sneakers, and Nike kind of looked at him and like, who cares? Burn your sneakers. You're just going to buy another pair in 6 months when you forget about this.
That's probably fair, right? There's no solutions, only trade-offs, as Thomas Sowell famously said.
Yeah. Yeah.
So looking across that universe of all the different stakeholders that you have, is this going to benefit it? And because the answer is never going to be yes to all of it or no to all of it. You need to make those decisions. So I think that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, a good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow, and you got to keep that in mind. Like you're never going to get it all right, and you're not going to get it all right all the time, and you're not even going to get it half right half the time. You just got to get it a little past half, and then you're doing pretty good.
I don't know that I've ever heard, and I hate to bring it back to Trump, but I don't know that I've ever heard him apologize. When a company has a misstep, do you think that they should say, "We're sorry, we screwed up," or just keep the thing moving?
It depends on what scale and what happened. I don't think Bud Light should have apologized, or Budweiser should have apologized. I mean, they didn't really. A company, when there's a crisis scenario or something has happened because of something that they did, whether it's, you know, Chipotle and food poisoning, or Toyota and a car defect, or an airlines or Boeing, when it's that, like, absolutely, you need to apologize. That also becomes complicated. We're just talking about how glad I'm not a lawyer, but that also gets complicated because then there are potential liability issues. If you are apologizing for something, are you saying that you are culpable for it, right? So that's where
Ah,
language becomes a dance as opposed to a march. And but companies, if you make a mistake, own up to it, figure out what went wrong, explain how you're going to prevent that from happening again, and move on.
how did it
It's a
go?
three-step process, right? Like
Yeah.
apologize, figure out what went wrong, and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Did not have sexual relations with that woman. So
Yep. As he understood sexual relations at the time.
outstanding. I think that I had never considered the liability part of accepting or admitting fault or responsibility, but of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it becomes like kind of, the plaintiff attorney game, right? Like plaintiff
Yeah.
attorneys play a role. They play an important role to check corporate greed, malfeasance, all these other sorts of things. But sometimes things get a little crazy.
So, an ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure.
Yep.
Have your plans made so that have a playbook, have its standard operating procedures, try to educate and disseminate that among your leadership team and as
Yep.
far down the chain.
Yeah, and you got to pressure test everything. That's a part that a lot of companies neglect to do. They'll write it. We'll work on a crisis plan with them. It'll be a big book, and it'll explain, all these different scenarios of what could happen and how you need to respond and the people you need to be involved. And then it just goes and sits on a shelf.
All
You
done.
can't do that. First, you got to do, you got to pressure test it as you're putting it together. We call, it's a term out of the military. It's actually a term from the Vatican, red teaming. Basically playing devil's advocate, where you flip the stakes and you try to think about things from the other direction. And we do that with basically every statement that we help companies write, every message that we work on, every narrative. We think about, what am I missing what does saying this do if we're trying to impact this group of people? Are we losing people? Are we gaining people? Are we not gaining enough people? Are we building credibility? Do we not have enough gravitas in this area to actually be credible? And that's a mistake a lot of startups make. Think of Theranos. They got way ahead of the game there, and no one was there to say, maybe don't, like, if you just say that you don't have the thing yet and you're building the thing, okay, you're not going to be a unicorn overnight, but maybe you'll get there someday. The VC space is littered with that, of companies that just never, that just, had this terrific story or a great storyteller to go out and talk about it, but didn't have there was no there. So that, again, when we talk about purpose, it's, well, first let's make sure there's some there before we go start talking to people about it.
That's a good line right there. Make sure there's some live there before
Yep.
we go say that we've just solved blood testing and everything. Well, Ellie, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people learn more about you? How can they engage with you and Purposeful Advisors?
Yeah, so I'm not particularly active on social media other than LinkedIn. You can just find me on LinkedIn, Elie Jacobs, Jacobs, and our website is Purposeful ADV, Apple David Victor, purposefuladv.com, and you can learn a little bit more about us. Our website's a little it leaves a lot to the imagination, but we feel like it does a decent job representing what we do. And I do a bunch of podcasts from time to time, and my business partner Frank DiMaria and I, we contribute a lot of opinion pieces to a whole bunch of different trade journals and other things. You can find that all on LinkedIn and on our website.
Excellent. If you enjoyed as much as I did, show Ellie your appreciation. Share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas. You can find Ellie on LinkedIn, Elie Jacobs. I'll certainly link that. And then go to purposefuladv.com and learn more about Ellie's work and everything we've been talking about today. Thanks again, Ellie.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Until next time, remember, do your part by doing your best.